Welcome back then folks to part 53 of the GT40 model building kit, and for this one you can see some of the parts over here are going to start to come back into play. The chassis, some of the front subframe, and that really starts to come together in this one specifically, part number 53. It looks to me that for this particular episode this stage is probably going to be the most fiddly out of all of them, or at least the most to do. And the parts that we've got this time are these ones. The front brake cooling tubes, and we've got some accoutrement here. So if we empty that out, okay. So step one, retrieve the chassis plate and interior assemblies. Place the interior onto the chassis, aligning the 4 holes with the corresponding posts. And then we have the interior plate here, which is due to go on top. Secure the interior to the chassis panel with 4 screws. Note that the right rear screw housing is hidden in the battery box. You must remove the top to fasten the screw and then press the top back into place. Right, okie dokie. So the battery box, I believe, is that one. Yeah, so the screw in there. Okay, so with those screwed on, it doesn't really show in the images where the wires are supposed to sit. You can't really see any of the wiring in the images, but given that these still need to be attached to other things, I don't think we want to be stuffing them underneath. So we've got one here, a couple at the back, one over here as well. And I just feel like if I folded those underneath, it just doesn't seem like the best of ideas. So it's got a nice amount of weight to it, this particular part. And now, obviously, we will move over to the next one, which is retrieve the front subframe, which is of course this piece here. Place it onto its housing on the front of the chassis, aligning the 4 corresponding holes of both parts. Okay, so those are now lined up correctly. A little tip that I would recommend trying, a little hack, is I actually kept, as you can see here, the battery box cover off from when we were screwing this up just now. Place it on your desk, and then for screwing this part in, you can lean the front end of the car on the battery pack. Obviously don't put too much weight on it, and it'll allow you to raise the chassis up enough to get this subframe over it without the wheels touching the ground. So it gives you enough leeway to like move this into place. It took a minute to get it properly aligned because you're only doing these 2 holes initially at the moment. We still don't have it, as you can see, attached to the not the suspension, I should say the steering rack yet, but that looks to be correct for now. It is lined up. It's taking shape in the form of an actual car. I don't recall if they've put the battery pack, or the battery cover, I should say, on yet, so I'm going to leave it off for a moment. In fact, I'll leave that under there to keep the car propped up. Then our next part, lay the model on its right side and fit a stabilizer bar link into the front left lower suspension arm. Okay, so I've actually linked those in now, as you can see. So those are straightened up and work now with the actual steering to turn with the wheel as they should. Good stuff. Okay, set that one down. So we still need to flip it onto its side, which we can now do. Hopefully it doesn't break. I don't think this is the correct side. I'm not sure if it is or not, but at least this side you can see what's going on. And then we are connecting this smaller piece to the lower suspension arm. Okay, so those are both done. I think we may have skipped to the next one. Repeat the operation, yep, on the other side to install the other stabilizer bar. Fit the stabilizer bar onto the free ends of the 2 links as shown. So that would be, I believe, this larger piece. Adjust the bar on the links by pressing on each of them until it is securely fastened. Secure the 2 stabilizer bar brackets to the chassis over the bar, aligning the holes in the brackets with the holes on the chassis. So we've got our connectors here. We've got 2 of those, and what screws are we using? We're using FDs again, and we are connecting those over these pairs of holes just here, these smaller ones. Okay, so with those tightened in underneath, it's definitely feeling a lot more secure now. There we go, still turning. All the connections are holding up. If we set that one back down again. Okay, stabilizer bar, fit the bar as shown. We've done that. And flip over. Fix the rest of the subframe assembly to the chassis plate with FP01 screws. Once the screws are fastened, the chassis and subframe should form a single unit. Okay, so we're going to flip it upside down and just add in basically the screws that are left, as it said. So that would be these ones here. And with that, those are all screwed in there. If we flip it back over, okay, starting to feel more secure. Place that one down. Okay, so fit the right front brake cooling tube, 53E. Do we have a right and left? I'm not sure. We've got two of those, so we'll take a closer look in a minute. Fit the cooling air tube. At the rear, it fits onto the cooling tube socket on the wheel, 2G, okay. While at the front, it fits onto the air intake socket on the chassis. Yeah, so pretty easy in terms of fitting, or at least seeing where to fit it. Repeat the same operation on the other side. Okay, and with those in, as you can see, they're actually relatively straightforward to get in. I just turn the wheel outward to put this end on first on the wheel, and then you can kind of maneuver the steering into place to pop it on the other end. But those are on there very nicely, as you can see. And yeah, pretty substantial part in this particular, just even single issue of putting these all together. It's coming together pretty nicely. And that is, of course, it for this part. I've replaced the battery cover, finally. And yeah, like I said, that appears to be, to finish the assembly, please check that the ends of the steering rack fit on the vertical rods. So, yep, we do have the steering rack. Kind of strange for them to leave that until literally last, but yeah, thankfully we did that earlier on. And yeah, stage complete. So that is part 53 done. Now on to 54. Okay then, so on to 54. We now have a couple of smaller pieces for the front grille assembly. So if we flip over to the back. Okay, step one, position the front lamp. So we've got this, whoops, this small lamp here. Position it with the tweezers that we don't have, but are shown here. Those are in the center build. Onto the projecting part of the radiator grille. Okay, so with the light on there, I must admit it was a lot more difficult to actually use the screwdriver that we've been using for the GT40 build, because with the amount of screwing that we've done, the end isn't as precise as it used to be, which is a bit of an oversight, I think, on their part. They could have at least thrown in another screwdriver by this point. So I actually used the one from the center build because it's a bit fresher and newer, and it did a better job of tightening that one in. Okay though, so that one is screwed in. Position the radiator grille frame assembly and the front light over the radiator grille. Fit the two posts on the ends of the frame into the holes in the grille, noting the small pin on one corner that ensures correct orientation. And then that is stage complete. So a little bit different to the last one that we just did, but hey, I welcome something simpler every so often. So there we have part 54 complete. Now, of course, on to 55. So then, we now have part 55. It looks to be a continuation of our assembly of the grille, because we've got some more pieces here, which certainly look like it. Some additional screws. Step one, retrieve the radiator grille assembly. From the previous stage, align the two holes on the grille assembly with the corresponding holes in the radiator. The radiator has a locating pin that fits into the grille to ensure correct alignment. Okay, so that's screwed in. Step 4, position the radiator box. This one, I believe, 55B, yep. So it's 2 holes fit over the 2 posts in the rear of the radiator. So that would be these 2 posts here. The direction is marked by the small pin. Yep, we've done that. Step 5, retrieve the chassis assembly. Okay, so we have that one just here. So that'll be this piece, of course. Align the radiator and front guard assembly with its housing on the chassis base. Insert the 2 posts in the bottom of the radiator, which I'm guessing are these, into the corresponding holes in the chassis, which look to be those. So that one is screwed in there. Now, insert the long end of the radiator line, so these ones in here, into the upper hole on the radiator box. Again, I've had to use the tweezers from the Senna's Lotus build. They're using it in images and never provided this in the GT40, so it's definitely an oversight on their part. So that end is snapped in. Insert the short end into the lower hole. So those ones are in there, as you can see. And that is, oh, kind of crept up on me, but it's stage complete. So with that one in, get that screw out of the way. That is our stage complete this time around, and that is it for 55. Now, of course, on to 56. Now, to me, part 56 and parts like this are a bit of a cop-out. In fact, they are a cop-out, because all we have in this piece is one of our notorious tyres that, of course, we'll have to boil later on. But for now, we're literally not even doing anything with it. It's just the spare tyre will be used in a later stage, and there's the parts when it will be complete. So I don't really like it when they do this. I get that you have extra information, but I would much rather they'd included this in, spoiler alert, part 57, as you'll see in just a second, because there's no reason to make this its own thing. And all of the information that's pertinent in this issue could have easily been spread into other issues just by making each one like a page bigger. But hey ho, that's the way they did it. So that's it for part 56. Now on to the last part for this episode, 57. And speaking of part 57, of course, the final piece, as I said, for this episode, this is a bit weird because I don't know if something happened with the packaging here, but my pieces were already out of their packaging. And the packaging was still in the box, but somebody had opened it and removed these, which is a bit odd. I'm sure most people didn't have it like that, but for whatever reason, that's how mine came. So we've got those 2 pieces. Position the wheel center, of course. We've done this, what, 3 times already at this point, I think, or at least twice. Over the wheel outer to position it correctly. Align the 4 pins, as we know all too well at this point. So click that one on. Fit the wheel center onto the wheel outer by pressure. Yep, you don't really need 2 steps for this. It's literally done, and that is stage complete. And it's such a short stage that it doesn't even say stage complete. So we have the rim there. We have the tyre, of course, which will doubtless be at least one of the first things to be done next time, I would imagine. But then again, when we did the first wheel, it was quite a long gap before we did anything else. So that's it for 57. A couple of very short parts in this episode, but also some really substantial stuff in the form of putting the chassis together and putting the subframe on. So a good mixed bag. And yeah, that's it for 57, and that's it for this episode. So I'll see you next time with more.